We read from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 13, beginning to read at verse 31. When Judas was gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now. Where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." May God help us to understand his word. Amen. Jesus said, "Love one another as I have loved you." In the old South Cliff Methodist Church, there were wooden panels on the wall behind the communion table. When the church was built, these panels were inscribed with the 10 Commandments to remind worshippers of the standards they were to live up to. In a refurbishment scheme long before my time, the 10 Commandments were varnished over, and the commandments of Jesus, including the above words, were painted on instead. Presumably they were thought to be less negative, more positive, and less frightening. However, if we really understand what Jesus means, it is possible that Jesus' new commandment might seem more scary than the 10 Commandments of the Old Testament. After all, if you have never worshipped another God, if you've looked after your parents, if you've done no work on the Sabbath, and if you were a reasonably good member of society, always telling the truth and never taking what was not yours, you could claim to have kept all the 10 Commandments. But love one another as I have loved you? Who has ever done that? Note, Jesus does not say, "Be nice and kind to one another." He says, "Love one another as I have loved you." Jesus gave up his home in glory and came to suffer and to die for us. Do we love each other, our fellow Christians and people we meet every day, like that? This verse needs to be read in conjunction with 1 John 3:16. Note the 1 at the beginning of that reference. It refers to the first letter of John, not the Gospel. 1 John 3:16 is less well known than the Gospel verse. Undeservedly so. It says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." Note, John does not say that we should lay down our lives for Jesus, but for our brothers and sisters. The first letter of John leaves us in no doubt that the small clutch of churches John was responsible for had suffered greatly from disunity. They had argued about doctrine, and they had argued about who was in charge. So all through the letters of John we encounter calls to unity and to love one another. And if we look closely, we can see the same theme being emphasized in the Gospel, especially as we enter these chapters leading up to the account of Jesus' death, where Jesus is seen as teaching his disciples rather than the crowd. Both John and Jesus knew how difficult it was for human beings to get on with one another. That is why Jesus says, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Because a group of human beings from diverse backgrounds getting on with one another would be an absolute miracle. It would only be possible if God were working mightily in their hearts and if they were allowing him to do so. This fellowship of love would be an earthly demonstration of what heaven would be like. The commands of Jesus are not an easier or lighter version of God's commands. They are more far-reaching because they command not just our outward obedience, but our inward obedience as well. They demand a complete giving over of our lives to Jesus and to others. So let us come to Jesus and give our lives completely into his control. Let us draw closer and closer to him in a personal relationship through prayer, meditation, through the reading of the scriptures and through worship, so his love may fill our hearts and overflow from us to others. It is only as we allow the love of Jesus to fill us and change us that we will find ourselves able to love our brothers, our sisters, and all people in the way Jesus loved us. And may the love we have for each other be such a powerful witness to others that those observing us may recognize that we are disciples of Jesus and desire to become his disciple themselves. Amen.